We're going to go ahead and use a cheesy effect to get rid of the template that they gave me. And you're in 10 ways to ensure RIA failure. Reality is we're going to talk about 10 ways to screw up any piece of software or project that you're working on. We'll start with just a little bit about me. I'm the president of Effective UI. My general role is not that glamorous. I'm a solutions engineer. I go and try to make connections between our clients and partners. I spend a lot of time helping our clients solution some software projects, mostly in rich internet application, but also on other platforms. We do have a very unique partner list. We are a strategic. I think we're a strategic agency partner now for Microsoft, which is we're a SAP. We're a preferred iPhone developer. We are a Club 6 partner for Adobe, and we have built some applications using JavaFX, believe it or not, directly for Sun. We primarily work with Fortune 2000 companies, Flash, Flex, Silverlight, Surface, any of the newer UI technologies to keep in light with our name. We call ourselves a user experience agency. Removing the lingo from that, we like to build great software with people, with helping our clients connect with their customers through design and technology. We help solve our customers' largest user adoption pain points. All right, let's get to the topic. I'm controlling this with my iPhone on my notes here, so I'm not being rude and looking at in text messaging while I'm presenting. First, it's a small crowd, but how many designers are here? A couple. Development? Management overhead? A couple. Anybody working for a small company, like large, over 500 folks, over 500 employees? Okay, a little bit. So a decent mix of the crowd. So what we're going to talk about today, well, let's start with users. So has anybody worked on a software project? If your software could look out through the monitor and look at the people using the software, has anybody worked on a project that you saw this expression? It's few. How many folks have seen these expressions? Your application would see these expressions. What we're going to talk about today is ways to ensure this expression. And then maybe solutions on how to get from this expression back to really engaged, active users. What we're not going to talk about today is, what not to do. There's thousands of ways to succeed at software development. I don't care if you're an agile firm that has small teams, or if you're large enterprise offshoring it. What we've seen working with large enterprises and small startups alike is there's these common threads of failure that if we see these things, we try to divert our clients back away from these threads. That's what we're going to talk about today. So the first rule: do not understand the end user. I don't think anybody here is going to be like, oh, thank you very much. I didn't think about that before I came in here. Of course, everybody wants to understand the end user. Where we see a lot of failures is, how do you turn this idea, this methodology, into action? This is where we see a lot of our companies fail putting this into action. Little stat. Nearly 70% of all IT projects fail due to lack of user acceptance. So if you're looking to fail, don't focus on the end user. The data backs it up. And as developers and designers, or anybody that's not connected with the end user, it's not our fault. We've been conditioned to think about people as these faceless. I mean, how many diagrams of system architecture do you see where you have this as the person sitting behind the monitor? We're conditioned to think of people as icons and not people. We should be thinking about people in this realm. If this is not who your users are, they soon will be. So think about people, think about software, think about the people using the software. And just to make sure you're paying attention, that was Tina Fey playing an accordion in a teddy. Just to make this point, drive this point home, Will Schumi, a little while ago, I'm going to steal a little bit of his content, talking about design. He did a talk on Design Matters. He asked the question, what was the first MP3 player? Does anybody know? It was the Diamond Rio, PMP300, introduced 2 years before the iPod, December 1998. So why do most of us have these? The iPod. Introduced 2 years later. The Rio had better battery life, more storage, more formats. First to market by 2 years. Only one person knew the Rio. Had more features. It's because going back, the company, the manufacturer, didn't focus on user experience. They focused on feature and functionality. They didn't focus on who their target audience was. New golden rule. Again, simple. Everybody here knows this. Hyper-focus on the end user. Every other rule that we're going to talk about today, every other failure, ultimately bubbles up to not following this simple rule. Now we're going to talk about ways that companies don't do this. So if you're looking to fail, trust developers to make good design decisions. And it's not just developers, it's anybody that's not connected with the end client. It's easy to find a lot of examples of where a developer probably made a design decision. This is one of, there's blogs dedicated to it, badui.com. And I'm sure everybody's seen something like this in a UI or an experience, a software experience. But the question is how did this happen? How do we as software engineers and developers and designers allow this type of work to bubble through to the end user? The truth is the developer was just trying to get their job done. He was focused on the deadline and not on the end client goal. The developer was asked to do a designer's job also. So there wasn't a designer involved with this. A designer would have probably never let this error message bubble up. There's lots of examples of this. SAP is riddled with it. PeopleSoft. Ironic note, SAP has a blog, Golden Rules for Bad User Interfaces. It's supposed to be sarcastic, but you have to have good UI in order for it not to be. Developers are encouraged to make really bad design decisions. We track deliverables based on project plan, number of completed features, and timetable. When we're able to meet deadlines, we don't talk about what the end user wants. As developers, we talk about what features we need to pull. How are we going to de-scope it? So how do we mind the gap between that design and developer? How do you bridge the gap between design and development? Well, the first rule here is trust in your designers. Technology platforms are, honestly, they're commoditized. Your customers don't care if it was built on .NET, Flash, Java, whatever, Silverlight. So the technology discussion isn't a discussion that's valued to your end user. It's more valued to your company, obviously, and your ability to scale and maintain, but it's not valuable to the end user. Don't let politics and silos get in the way. I know that's very hard, especially for the folks that raise their hand in their large companies. And we'll talk about some ways to get around that. Educate your design team on the technical challenges. They will work with you. A big part of our projects is incorporating our design team and development team together. And there is no first or second class citizen in these projects. Project management, experienced architects, designers, developers all work collaboratively together and argue things out. A good designer will help you understand the end user needs if you're a developer. So trust in them on that. And when in doubt, when you don't trust, go back to the end users. Ask the end users. How many people here have been a part of a project where you actually got to talk to an end user? Oh, good. A good number of hands. That a year ago, it wasn't that much. And I know I have a small sample here, but designers also have a responsibility, as well as creating software that fails. They have a responsibility for creating bad software, which brings me to this next point. If you're looking to fail, hope for a silver bullet design. A good agency won't come in with the big idea. In fact, a lot of the projects that I'm involved with is unraveling the big genius idea. Not to say that genius ideas are bad. What I mean by genius idea is having a designer go away and think on a problem for a long time and then come up with the a chihuahua selling a taco, right? It's the huge idea that nobody ever thought of. Those are really important. In fact, we do a lot of work for Discovery Networks. This is Discovery Earth Live, where we had to come up with a way to allow consumers to interact with data from NASA and NOAA. And this was a big win when we launched it. And it did require some big idea thinking. But the designers weren't married to the genius idea. So we actually changed the design dramatically 3 times, twice during user testing and user interviews and stakeholder interviews, and once actually after we had already implemented it based on some changing business requirements. So if you're married to your design as a designer, you're not going to be able to, you need to be humble and empathetic with your design and not make a portfolio piece. But also sometimes small changes are big. Jared Spool, on his blog, and you got to do a Google search on a $300 million button. But sometimes these small changes are huge. He talks about a company that changed a register button to a continue button, and they saw a lift of $300 million in annual revenue. That's a significant number, and it's just a small change, but it came through having empathy for the end user and actually watching them walk through the process of going through a registration process. So how do you do this? How do you trust your user? Well, first, as a designer and a developer, add the word empathy to your job description. Put it back and put it into action by actually talking to your users. Be willing to throw out your ideas based on user feedback, and do not focus on your portfolio. Again, a personal story, I worked at Warner Brothers for about a year in feature post-production, and my first day there, I was walked through the studio by a supervisor, and I was kind of awestruck. I was going to get to make movies. It's not as glamorous as you might think, not even close. But he told me, if you're making a sound effect or you're working on special effects, and the audience member notices the special effect, then you've lost your job. Like, you haven't done your job. And that's the same for interface design. If the audience is noticing the interface design, you're taking them away from the task or the engagement that you're trying to get them to do. There is also a flip to this model. If you listen to your end user, your customer, your employees that are going to be using the software too much, and you take their feedback too literally, you're going to make mistakes. Good example, we designed and built eBay Desktop. It's a desktop application. And during our user interviews in the first iterations of the prototype, we got a lot of feedback about the refresh button. Where's the refresh button? It's a desktop app. And they kept asking us for the refresh button. And we drilled down into the core issue of what our test group were telling us about. And what they were saying was, they didn't trust the data. Not that they wanted a refresh button. They just didn't trust the data. So what we did is we created, you saw it there, well, you see it here, the countdown timer. It says that this data is recent and relevant. And so the second we put the countdown timer in, the refresh button request just went away. So we solved the problem not by answering the user feedback directly, but again, drilling down to the core issue. What this means for designers is you can't be order takers. You have to use your brain and drill down into what your customers are asking you for. Sometimes, however, design tries to go too far, which brings me to my next point: build for everyone. If you're looking to fail, build for everyone. I got to remember to say that, because otherwise people are writing down "build for everyone" as a thing to do. If you build for everybody, you wind up building for nobody. Everybody, when talking about user experience and good software design, they always come up with an iPhone example. So we're not going to avoid the topic, but I'm going to talk about why the iPhone is actually a curse for a lot of software development firms. I hear quite often, we want the iPhone usability for my mortgage calculator or for my insurance claim form. Well, it's first off not the right way to think about it. And also, the iPhone is not a good example. I'm holding one, so I I can poke a little bit of fun at it, but it's not a good example of how to approach design. First, Apple spent a lot of money on user research and evaluation of the UI. More money than most of us will ever have to spend on software design. Secondly, they had full control over the integration. They got AT&T to change their APIs in order to make visual voicemail work. Very few of us, if any, are lucky enough to be able to work on a project where we can tell AT&T how to change the way they're doing business for our software. It's hard to use. I handed my iPhone once to my mom and asked her to make a call. She was lost. She has a cell phone. She's not an idiot. But she didn't know how to place a call on my iPhone. What they did was really kind of interesting. All of Apple's ads, all of the marketing for the iPhone is somebody using it. They're teaching us in their ads how to intuitively, so it just feels intuitive. If you've seen the ad, you just instantly start swiping. My mom didn't know how to do that. She never saw an iPhone ad. So we don't have the luxury that Apple does to push what we think usability is. We have to go and reach out to them and figure out how they see usability. It's easier to think of people like this. We hear a lot about simplicity and the value of simplicity in software. The truth is, same subject is, it's easy to think of things in simple metaphors. We don't all have that luxury. If we have FDA requirements to worry about, or government regulations to think about in software, if we're outsourcing, we can't, or we're integrating into this huge, complex legacy system, we can't think of things in these simple forms. What we wind up with when you try to design and build for everybody, you wind up with nothing at all simple, and you wind up with something that is something that's built for everybody that has thousands of features. It's impossible to navigate. It's built for nobody. So, how do you not build for everybody? Well, you focus your efforts. You add the word. It's a similar statement. Add empathy to your job description. We try to define and limit the number of personas we build for to 3. Now, there are certain occasions where we expand that when it's a more consumer-faced application that is simpler. You can build for more. But there's more to knowing just your end user. You need to help them understand context. So it's not just knowing the person, but you have to understand where they're going to be using that technology, in what environment. A good example of this is we're working for we're working for Quest. We're doing a lot of work on their business portal, and we went and did user interviews in their offices, in the offices that they were using the Quest software from. And we uncovered some, first of all, user interviews are great because you uncover these nuggets that stakeholders didn't even realize or you would have never guessed. The real golden nuggets come out of those user interviews. The second thing we noticed is we started to look at software that was not related to the task that they were doing, but they were using elsewhere. And we drove familiar user interface pieces from the other software, tangential software, Facebook and whatever social network they were using. And we were able to drive familiarity and instant intuitiveness into the software based on just understanding what those people worked in every day. Most of them was just simply Microsoft Excel. If you do a great job of designing and developing for people, you're still not done. Another thing that we see all the time is launch and forget. This is when you launch a piece of software, version 1, and then you work on the next shiny object. You don't work on iterating it. Most software, especially when you're releasing a version 1, it's only half done. There's a lot of learning to do. Classic example of launches forget is Salesforce. I hate this interface. It hasn't changed much since they launched it in 1999. They haven't innovated on the UI. Now, I don't have any data to back this up, but I'm going to make a guess. If you look at Salesforce's revenue, it grows. It's a linear growth. It just continues to grow in Excel. Their profit, the dollars of their profit, stay flat. So if you have this kind of trajectory, what that says to me is user acquisition costs and user retention costs just continue to climb as the revenue is climbing. They're not. My proposition is that if they focused on user retention and good UI, they would see their profits climb as well. Measuring user behavior is also different than web analytics. So you're not measuring click streams or click-throughs or conversion rates. You want to measure things like what help topics did they uncover? Did they use the feature did they successfully use a feature that they looked at a help topic from? Embed things like user feedback right in the software. Missing one. Oh, and you can also, with user behavior, understand how your users look at and walk through certain tasks, and you can start to drive groupings of tasks and make wizards, especially in software that isn't forms-based. This is a tool we've actually had to write on our own because there's not a lot of good tools out there to measure user behavior in rich internet applications. Measure for improvement. So account for future, these are, again, no-brainer things. We all talk about these things, but we never do them. So I'm just going to reinforce it. Account for future releases up front. Integrate customer feedback into the software. User testing during and post-launch. And monitor your success metrics. So that brings me to my next thing that we see quite often. If you're looking to fail, don't define success. That seems really simple, but has anybody here been on a project you didn't know what the win was? Nobody? Well, one. One that's being honest about it anyway. I see this a lot. And it's not that the stakeholders don't understand how to define, they don't know that they shouldn't define success. It's that they don't know how. They don't know how to pull it together. To define success, we just to give a little snapshot, we don't talk about features or requirements. We talk about qualitative and quantitative success metrics. Things like we want our customers to recommend the software to somebody else, to this many people. That's a qualitative. The customer has a perception of a fast transaction. Quantitative are things like reduce shipping costs or the times it take to track something by 20%, or increase leads by 50%. So when we're defining software, we force these success metrics. These are the foundation of a piece of software. We will not proceed without understanding what the project win is. There's a balance as well. It has conflict. Business value versus end user value. We saw a lot before the dot-com bubble of not being able to drive the balance. So balancing on one way or the other. Dot-com bubble was driving more user value. Eyeballs were king. Remember that? Where everybody was all focused on the eyeballs and not focused on the business. Driving business value, and a lot of companies went under because they had no business model. I don't know if anybody remembered the acquisition of Blue Mountain Arts by Excite, but they bought the company for $1 billion, and they weren't even turning a profit. It was all about eyeballs. Well, that acquisition was a failure because they weren't balancing enough on business value. And what we're seeing a lot today is too much of a focus on business value. An extreme example of that would be something like spammers, where they're just ecstatic with a 0.01% conversion rate. It's all about what can the user do for me and my company, and not what can I do for them. So this is a conflict, right? Business value and user value. It's a conflict because, a simple example, if I'm a customer of a bank, it's much easier for me to pick up the phone and call the bank than to go and speak to a live person than through a voice UI or interact with them on a website. I'd much rather pick up the phone and call them. But as a business, it makes a lot more sense to force them through a self-service channel. So how do you avoid that conflict? How do you avoid it? Well, that brings me to my next point. If you're looking to fail, avoid conflict. You can't. Conflict is good. An account manager that works for us, Elias Parker, actually graduated with a conflict resolution degree, and he said there is no progress without conflict. We'll use a much better quote from Thomas Paine. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Conflict is good. in these processes. If you have a bunch of people in the room agreeing to the direction you're going, that's a red flag. That means that somebody's not actually voicing their opinion. It's impossible to have 6 people in a room that all agree. It's impossible. So if you have a bunch of people agreeing, you're not doing your job to adequately bubble up what the real concerns of the project are. And if you're not hearing it, play devil's advocate. If you write, so I carpool every day in with my business partner. We carpool in for an hour. And we argue the whole way. We argue, and you don't know which side of the argument either one of us are on. Because I'll be pro, he'll be con on the same topic, and we'll flip 3 or 4 times on the way in. It's because we're trying to drive out a resolution. Conflict, passion is good in your software meetings. If you don't have it, you're missing a lot of stuff. Conflicts also mean that you have to be really good at articulating your ideas. You have to be good at selling your ideas, which brings me to my next point. If you're looking to fail, believe you shouldn't have to sell your ideas. It's your job as a stakeholder. Well, every project needs a leader. They need somebody with a vision and the political capital to be able to execute on projects. But a lot of times we see this is actually the most commonly overlooked component or piece of a puzzle to gaining software adoption within an organization. The stakeholder just believes his organization should just get it. And they don't value enough the sales pitch they need to do internally. And it's not just our stakeholder, the executive, it's the whole project team. You have to be able to sell as a developer or designer, especially design. You have to be able to sell your ideas. And what that means is, it's not used car salesman. It's understanding the objections that your counterparts are going to have before you get into it. Understand the personalities involved. Things like, predict what they're going to ask you and be able to answer their objections. Things like, what will the ROI be? How will we measure success? Why should we do this now? What's the cost of doing nothing? You should have these answers for yourself as you're walking through and planning software development projects. Listen to your customers and ensure their opinions align with their users. So one thing that we've been very successful with is taking the word I out of an opinion. So walking into a project where you have the right thing to do and say, I think we should do this. Instead, we've shifted that language to your customers are telling you they want this. If you focus and shift the conversation to empathy, an empathetic conversation, this is what your customers are telling you, it's a lot easier to sell that idea. Be passionate about your ideas. That's also another thing that we commonly see, especially in large organizations where it's hard for people to stick their neck out a little bit and be passionate about an idea. And then oversell. I can't stress this enough. So I'm going to show you what we call, this is a vision demo that we built for Quest. There's no software behind this. This is a movie that we canned, but it showed the executives within Quest what the bar was. This is what we are going to build for your customers. This is the interactions. This is the engagement we're going to drive for them, for your business portal. And our stakeholder stood up, from marketing, stood up with her IT counterpart to the entire executive team, and they presented this pitch together. Now, it did a couple of things. First of all, this is something that this level of engagement is something Quest doesn't usually see. So they got the entire stakeholders, along with her passion and her ability to sell the project, was really what's the word I'm looking for? It grew. It was pervasive throughout the company. It is contagious. It also, with her standing there with her IT counterpart, showed that they were aligned together, that this is what that team was about to deliver. This project got full funding, and we just released the first version of it. I can't talk about the metrics, but a very big win for Quest. A good book to read. I know it's, again, used car salesman, but the Sales Bible is actually a really good book. It talks about ways to position and understand objections from the folks that you're talking to. If you're good at sales, you're good at designing, you have everything perfectly set up, you can still fail. If you're looking to fail, plan for perfection. Again, something we see all the time. We see this a lot when companies come to us with an RFP, where they want us to fix bid. I'll go ahead and let this go.
The first matrix I designed was quite naturally perfect. It was a work of art, flawless, sublime, a triumph equaled only by its monumental failure.
I see that a lot. That describes a lot of companies that we talk to when they're looking for that perfect project plan or the perfect estimate or understanding everything perfect. It never works out. If you've ever been a part of a waterfall project, a project where you figure everything out up front, it never even winds up looking like what you started with anyway, no matter how well you set it up for perfection. So I'm gonna go off on a tangent here. I'm madly in love with my wife, and I'm going somewhere with this, trust me. But she always plans for perfection. If we're gonna go somewhere, we're planning a trip. This is the route she plans for. This direct linear route. The truth is that this is usually what our route looks like. This is usually what the route looks like to most software development, where the direction from point A to point B isn't the same. It's not a linear, it's not one direct line, excuse me. I'm the guy that likes to leave 15 minutes early and arrive 5 minutes late. If it didn't make us any later, and I didn't think I was going to get smacked in the back of the head for doing this, I'd sit my wife down and give this pitch to her. In order to arrive on time, we have to catch all green lights. We have to not forget anything. We can't have any car accidents, no issues with the kids. It amazes me how many companies plan software like my wife plans a road trip. They believe that planning for perfection and seeing that just a direct linear route is the way to go in software development. We show this, what we call the cone of uncertainty, to every one of our clients before we enter an engagement. And what we tell them is, it's a very difficult argument to have. But it's just bluntly, it's truth. You never really know what a project is going to do until you're in it and you're working on it. I shouldn't say never. It's very rare. As you're defining even as you're defining high-level requirements and wireframing, as you start definition and execution, the uncertainty starts to shrink. It's the reason why the RFP process is really broken. Companies decide that they're going to list all these requirements out. They're not, again, listing requirements out is not a definition for success. Interviews with the customer throughout the project engagement is the way you get alignment with those success metrics. And so if you try to define all the requirements up front, you're going to change anyway. So how can you take a requirements document and expect that it's going to be a great piece of software at the end when you're not really accounting for changes that need to happen in the software process? Planning to perfection leads to overthought as well. A lot of times we'll spend a lot of churn with companies that want to go through a waterfall process. We'll just overthink a problem. And the truth is that developers and designers will actually figure it out along the way, quite often. Which brings me to my final point. If you're looking to fail, value the process over the product. This also could be titled, if you're looking to fail, take no risk. And I think I have a little problem here with my presentation. Hold on one second. The iPhone app is too cool than I need. So process diagrams are they're truly a dime a dozen. We come up against this quite often where our customers ask you, what's your process? The company B that you're up against has this great process slide that shows us how our project is going to go. And I asked them to ask that vendor, how many of your projects actually follow that process? And we never get a response back because there's no truth. None of our processes look the same. Every one of our software development processes look different. if we believe we have everything figured out up front, we all tend to focus. So if you don't have success metrics set up and you believe you already have everything figured out, your team will start to focus on the process and the tasks and not focus, again, bubble up and focus on what those success metrics are. It means nothing to deliver a crappy product on time. When we overplan, we assume that we can operate inside of that plan, that people can actually operate inside of a plan. I'll throw up a joke calendar here. This is how we tend to schedule projects. We have a project kickoff meeting, we think really hard, and then we have requirements complete. And then we have a little bit of spare time, so we're going to just solve world hunger. Like, people don't think like this. People don't believe, you can't solve all the problems in a project plan. It'd be great if we could do this. So it fails to account for one undeniable truth. Software projects are predictably unpredictable. You will not be able to, you're building something from nothing. People try to say, well, the construction industry, you can fix bid, or you can look at a building going up, and you can very well predict what that's going to look like. But most software projects, we don't know how many square feet the building is going to be. We don't know how tall it's going to be. We don't know who the residents are. So how are you going to build a building with so many gray areas? And by the way, it's amorphous. It's going to continually change as you're building it. So how do you account for and schedule around innovation? Well, what we do is we create a lot. Oops, I went too far. We create a lot of deliverables in the first few weeks of an engagement. We do user interviews and personas and mood boards and wireframes and experience maps and these vision demos. And all of these get us about 50% of the way. They don't define the entire project. What they do is they inspire innovation. They don't define it. So the way you inspire innovation is by defining success metrics, defining a high-level 20,000-foot view, and doing as granular as you need to go, especially on the areas where are high risk. You build prototypes, but then you let the team figure it out along the way. This is where innovation happens. In the shower, on a park bench, thinking outside of the office, not in front of a monitor and a keyboard. So your job as project managers and designers is to understand, and developers is to understand the entirety of the project, and then allow your brain to work. So why care about any of this? Remember these people? Application looking out at these engaged users. Let's talk about the win for this company. Sales conversion time, so the amount of time it took for a salesperson to close business on this online application, reduced 35%. Manufacturing costs were cut 42%. This is the one that nobody believes, but it's the truth. Online revenue grew from $5 million to $85 million. And all of this happened in 9 months. This is why you need to care about your end user. The ROI, the value to your business, the value to the top line, and the value to the bottom line. The truth is if you don't think about this, your competitors are going to. And you're going to be playing catch up. So I ended really early. Did I talk too fast? I'm going to open it up for questions. I know everybody probably wants to go out and gamble and catch a plane or something, but I'm ready to you guys to throw darts at me and call BS on me. No, okay. No questions? Yeah, everybody wants to go. All right, well, I'm supposed to ask you to fill out a comment card. If you liked the session, my name is Anthony Franco. If you didn't, it's Will Schumi. Thank you.